October 2000, Dallas, Texas. Two founders of a small, barely surviving startup walk into the headquarters of the biggest video rental company on Earth. Their company is called Netflix. Fewer than 300,000 subscribers, losing money every quarter. A DVD by mail service most people had never heard of. They have one offer to make: buy us for $50 million. Across the table sits John Antioco, CEO of Blockbuster. 9,000 stores, 60 million customers, $6 billion a year in revenue. The undisputed king of video rental. According to both Netflix founders, there was a long silence. Then something that sounded a lot like laughter. You've heard this story before. It's one of the most repeated cautionary tales in business. Blockbuster laughed Netflix out of the room, and it cost them everything. But the man who was actually sitting in that room has spent the last 20 years telling a very different version of what happened that day. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why neither version is the real reason Blockbuster died. Because 7 years after that meeting, this same man, the one blamed for the worst decision in retail history, walked out of Blockbuster's headquarters for the last time, sold every share of Blockbuster stock he owned, and quietly put the money into Netflix. Tonight, we're going to find out if John Antioco killed Blockbuster, or if he was the only person in the building who actually understood what was happening to it. To understand what was actually lost, you have to understand what Blockbuster built. October 19th, 1985. A single store in Dallas, Texas. Founder David Cook, a former oil industry data analyst, built something no video store had. A computerized inventory system that could track thousands of tapes across a whole chain. It sounds small. It wasn't. While competitors ran video stores like corner shops, Blockbuster ran one like a logistics company. It scaled in a way nobody in the industry could match. By 1994, it was big enough that Viacom, owner of Paramount, MTV, Nickelodeon, bought the whole chain outright. By 2004, Blockbuster had grown into something almost unimaginable today. Over 9,000 stores, 84,000 employees, nearly $6 billion a year in revenue. Walking into a mall in America in the 1990s without passing a Blockbuster was almost impossible. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. When Viacom spun Blockbuster back off as its own public company in 2004, it didn't send it off clean. Blockbuster was forced to pay a $5 per share special dividend to its former parent, a payout so large the company had to take out a $905 million loan just to cover it. Blockbuster's empire didn't collapse under Netflix's weight. It walked into the fight for its life already carrying almost $1 billion of debt it never chose to take on. Reed Hastings, Netflix's own co-founder, would later admit, if it hadn't been for their debt, they could have killed us. Keep that, because everything you're about to hear happens with that debt sitting quietly in the background the entire time. So, back to that meeting. By 2000, Netflix had been operating for 3 years, losing money every single quarter. Reed Hastings and co-founder Mark Randolph flew to Dallas with one goal: get Blockbuster to either buy them or partner with them before the dot-com crash finished them off. Randolph's own account, published years later in his book, describes it like this: Netflix would run the online side, Blockbuster would run the stores. One combined company owning both the physical and digital future of movie rental. The price? $50 million. Randolph says the room went silent. Then Blockbuster's executives could barely hold back their laughter. Here's the first thing that doesn't add up. John Antioco, the man in the room, the man who's been blamed for this decision in business schools and YouTube videos for 2 decades, says it didn't happen the way you've heard. In a public statement years later, Antioco confirmed the meeting happened, confirmed Netflix offered to sell for $50 million, but he denies there were ever serious acquisition talks. He denies laughing them out of the room. And he points out something that changes the whole read of this moment. At the time, Netflix wasn't selling movies by mail to everyone. It was serving movie buffs, early DVD adopters, people who shopped online, a niche inside a market Blockbuster already dominated with 9,000 physical locations. Buying a struggling, unprofitable mail-order startup for $50 million in the middle of a market crash that was actively destroying .com companies was not the obviously insane decision it looks like from 2026. It only looks insane because of what happened next. So if the meeting wasn't the moment that killed Blockbuster, what actually was? To answer that, we don't go to Netflix's headquarters. We go back inside Blockbuster's own boardroom, 4 years later, where a very different kind of threat had just bought its way onto the board. 2004. A billionaire activist investor named Carl Icahn starts quietly buying Blockbuster stock. By early 2005, he controls roughly 10% of the company, enough to force a shareholder vote. He wins seats on the board. Icahn's read on Blockbuster was simple: cut spending, return cash to shareholders, stop bleeding money on an online business that didn't have Netflix's head start. Antioco's read was the opposite. He believed the only way to survive was to become a real competitor online and to kill the one thing that was quietly poisoning Blockbuster's relationship with its own customers: late fees. By the early 2000s, late fees had become a genuinely massive part of Blockbuster's profit and a genuine source of public hatred for the brand. Antioco's plan to eliminate them was projected to cost the company as much as $500 million a year in lost fee revenue, plus another $170 million in new spending. Icahn thought it was reckless. Antioco pushed it through anyway. Then, in 2006, Antioco launched something bigger: Blockbuster Total Access, a hybrid model. Order DVDs by mail, like Netflix, but return them to any physical store and walk out with a free in-store rental the same day. Something Netflix, with zero physical footprint, could never match. And here's the second thing that doesn't add up. The thing that breaks the entire Blockbuster was blind myth. Total Access wasn't a failure. It was working. By early 2007, according to Blockbuster's own first-quarter earnings call, the company was adding subscribers so fast it was on track to capture nearly 70% of the entire market's net online growth for the year. Not 70% of Blockbuster's growth, 70% of the whole online DVD rental industry's growth, ahead of Netflix. Antioco would later say, "I firmly believe that if our online strategy had not been essentially abandoned, Blockbuster Online would have 10 million subscribers today, and we'd be rivaling Netflix for the leadership position in the internet downloading business." Read that again. The company you've been told never saw the future coming had already built a working answer to it, and for 1 year, it was winning. So, if the strategy was working, why did it stop? Because the fight over how much it cost to win was about to become personal. And it wasn't a fight about Netflix at all. 2006 was Blockbuster's best year in a while. Total Access was growing. Late fees were gone. Customers were, for the first time in years, less angry. Under his contract, Antioco was due a performance bonus of more than $7.6 million. Icahn thought it was excessive. He and the board tried to withhold part of it. It doesn't sound like much, set against a $6 billion company, but it became the fault line. Not the strategy, not the debt, not even Netflix. A bonus dispute. By March of 2007, the relationship between Antiaco and Icon had completely broken down. On March 20th, Blockbuster announced Antiaco would leave the company by the end of the year. Buried in Antiaco's original contract was a change of control clause, reportedly worth as much as $50 million if he was pushed out. Icon publicly accused Antiaco of trying to blackmail the board with that number. But when the departure was finalized, Antiaco didn't walk away with $50 million. Reporting at the time described him leaving with roughly 1/3 of what his contract could have entitled him to, a fraction of the number Icon had spent months publicly attacking him over. The man accused of holding the company hostage for a fortune left with a fraction of it. The board replaced him with Jim Keyes, a leader far more aligned with Icon's philosophy of cutting costs and returning cash to shareholders. And here is the third thing that doesn't add up. Under Keyes, Blockbuster brought late fees back. It slowed the very online expansion that had just spent a year outgrowing Netflix. The board that fought so hard over a $7 million bonus had just walked away from a strategy that, by the company's own numbers, was capturing the majority of an entire industry's growth. Icon wanted to protect shareholder value. He may have just protected it out of the only thing that could have saved it. December 2008. A journalist asks Blockbuster's new CEO, Jim Keyes, a simple question. Are you worried about Redbox and Netflix? His answer, on the record, neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. It's more Walmart and Apple. 2 years before bankruptcy. After Blockbuster's own earnings calls had already shown Netflix was the fastest growing threat to its business. After Total Access had already proven, with real subscriber numbers, that the online war was real and winnable. The man now running the company said the online war wasn't even happening. And according to reporting from inside the company at the time, some of Blockbuster's own senior executives didn't believe him either. As the online strategy was scaled back, several long-serving Blockbuster executives quietly sold their Blockbuster shares and put the money into Netflix stock instead. They didn't need inside information about what Netflix was building. They'd just spent 2 years watching Blockbuster's own leadership walk away from the one thing that was working. The numbers after that tell the rest of the story fast. Revenue fell from nearly $6 billion in 2004 to just over $3 billion by 2010. Employees fell from 84,000 to 25,000. Debt sat at roughly $1 billion, the same debt bomb from the 2004 spin-off still ticking. September 2010. Blockbuster files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. April 2011. Its remaining 1,700 stores are auctioned off. The winning bid, $320 million, comes from an unlikely buyer, satellite TV provider Dish Network. The same brand that once earned $6 billion a year sold for barely 5% of that number. January 2014. Dish shuts down the last roughly 300 corporate-owned Blockbuster stores in America. Only the independently owned franchise locations survive. One by one, they close too. Alaska, then Australia. By March 2019, one store is left standing on the entire planet. A small franchise location in Bend, Oregon, run by a couple who'd licensed the Blockbuster name back in 2000. It is now, unintentionally, the most famous video store on Earth. So let's close the file, as much as it can be closed. Carl Icahn, the activist investor who fought to protect Blockbuster's money, walked away with a blunt verdict of his own. Years later, reflecting on the whole saga, he said it plainly. Blockbuster turned out to be the worst investment I ever made. It failed because of too much debt and changes in the industry. The man who fought hardest to save shareholder value ended up describing the entire fight as a loss. And John Antioco, the man blamed for the $50 million meeting, the man Icon called overpaid, the man who left with a fraction of his contract, did something almost nobody talks about. He sold his Blockbuster shares. He put the money into Netflix, then trading around $20 a share. In his own words, years later, "I could see that Netflix was going to have the whole DVD by mail market handed to it, along with the direct path to streaming movies into homes, which is exactly what Netflix has done." He sold at around $35 a share. "I thought I was a genius," he admitted. At the time this video was made, that same stock trades for well over 10 times what he sold it for. The man blamed for missing Netflix once quietly caught it the second time, and then sold too early anyway. So, who actually killed Blockbuster? Not one villain, a sequence. A debt load nobody chose, a late fee war that cost hundreds of millions to win back customer trust, a hybrid strategy that was genuinely beating Netflix for one single year, a bonus dispute that ended the one leadership that believed in that strategy, a new CEO who publicly denied the threat even existed 2 years before it ended the company. Which brings us back to where we started. That meeting, October 2000. 2 men were in that room. 2 accounts still exist of what happened in it. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph say Blockbuster laughed them out of the building. John Antioco says that never happened, that it was a fair, reasonable pass on an unprofitable niche startup in the middle of a market crash, made by a company that went on to build a real answer to Netflix just a few years later. Both men were there. Neither account has ever been resolved. And maybe that's the actual lesson. Not the number everyone quotes, not the $50 million. The fact that even the 2 men who lived it can't agree on what almost buying Netflix actually meant. The empire was real. The 9,000 stores were real. The nearly $6 billion a year, very real. The only thing in this entire story that was never settled is what actually happened in that room. So I'll leave the verdict to you. Who actually killed Blockbuster? Type 1. Carl Icahn, the activist who won the fight and lost the company. Type 2. Jim Keyes, the CEO who said the war wasn't happening. Type 3. The debt. Nobody survives a $1 billion loan taken to please a former parent company. Type 4. Nobody. Netflix was always going to win this war eventually. Blockbuster just chose exactly when to lose it. The comments section is the jury. And if you want the next investigation, a private equity firm that took billions out of a toy store and left 30,000 people without jobs, that file is already open on this channel.